To our YouTube viewers, we want to say thank you for joining us on Advent Hope Online Sabbath Closing. We have a young lady with us that is very passionate to reach out to each and everyone worldwide. And the Lord has placed a message on her heart in the shadow of Moses. And her name is Anushka Harmse. And she's opened up her time to come and share about this. So thank you very much.
Hi, I hope you all had a happy Sabbath. So I'm going to try and speak slower than I normally do because I tend to go like a racehorse. I've been referred to as a scatterbrain. So hopefully my thoughts will all align at the end and you'll be able to follow what I've been trying to say. So I feel like I'm bad with favorites. I can't choose a favorite because I feel like every experience you go through kind of gives you a new favorite song, a new favorite color, a new favorite anything. So I'm generally pretty bad at picking a favorite. But if I had to pick a favorite book in the Bible, I'm sorry, that's my dog. It would have to be Exodus. I've come If you haven't had the time to properly study Exodus, I would really recommend just going through the book, just looking at the details that we so often miss. So tonight we're going to be looking at the shadow of Moses and in the shadow of Moses. And for us to look at, the shadow of Moses, we have to first look a bit at Moses. And we all know that Moses is, well, he's a pretty amazing figure in the Bible, this pillar of faith. This meek man who had so much patience with the Lord's people, the guy who walked through the Red Sea, all these amazing miracles that he did, the plagues, everything. But I think what stands out the most about Moses is his relationship with God. So we're just going to look at a few things so we can get to the point. So in Exodus 19, we read a lot about how God wants Moses to go up into Mount Sinai, to go and get the 10 Commandments. So in verse 10, it starts, and this is something that I always overlooked when I studied the Bible. So we're going to get to that point. In Exodus 19, verse 10, it starts, then the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes. And let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. You shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, take heed to yourselves, that you do not go up the mountain or touch its base. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. Not a hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot with an arrow. Whether man or beast, he shall not live, when the trumpet sounds long. So after that, we read about the Israelites sanctifying themselves to go up into the mountain. But in verse 23 and 24, we read, but Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up to the mount. For you warned us, saying, set bounds around it, the mountain and around the mountain and consecrate it. Then the Lord said to him, away, get down, and then you come up, you and Aaron with you. But do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to the Lord, lest he break out against them. And I always read this and thought, so he invited them and they ended up not going up. They were too afraid. And in Deuteronomy 5, we read that same thought. It says, I stood between the Lord and you at that time to declare to you the word of the Lord, for you were afraid because of the fire and you did not go up to the mountain. So we see that the Israelites were afraid to go up. They all had the option to go up. And this is something that as a child, I didn't realize. And as I grew up, it's something that astounded me. They all had the option to go up, but only Moses ended up going up. That's what I thought, at least. Going on, we see that Moses had a relationship with God that was pretty astounding. After the whole golden calf thing, God wanted to destroy his people. We see that in Exodus 32. So he wanted to he wanted to destroy the stiff-necked people. But Moses knew God. He knew the character of God. He knew that God didn't really want to destroy his people. He loved his people, and that wasn't God's character. And in my brain, it's like a sort of taste to see how well Moses knew God. And he took God back. Sorry, I'm just gonna So sorry, she likes chasing bugs, and there are bugs because it's raining. So and now I lost my train. So my train. Can someone please remind me where my train was? Too many tabs open.
Moses intervened
Thank
on their
you.
behalf.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Wow. 25 when I'm acting like I'm not 25. Okay. So so Moses was intervening on behalf of Israel because he knew God and he taught God back, and it's such a beautiful piece. So we see the relationship that Moses had with God, that he was comfortable enough to approach God and ask that God spare his people. He was comfortable enough to know that God would listen to his request. Like Abraham talking to God and asking, but if there's only 10, if there's only talking God back from his wrath, knowing God well enough to see that God is a God of love. So we see that relationship with God. And after he talked God back from that, God was still so mad. And he asked Moses to pitch the tabernacle of meeting, that tent, outside of the camp. The tent where people would meet with God, pitch it outside of the camp, outside of all the distractions, outside of all the sin. Just put it outside. And it's such a beautiful piece. In Exodus 33, verse 7, we start reading. Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who saw the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. So it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose, and each man stood at his tent door and watched Moses until it had gone down into the tabernacle. And it came to pass, when Moses entered the tabernacle, that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. And all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshipped, each man in his tent door. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend. And he would return to the camp. And now I'm pausing. So it's such a beautiful piece. You see that relationship that Moses had with God, that faith, a faith that was so strong that when people saw him going to meet with God, they worshipped as well. His faith was so strong that it elicited this desire to know God as well. And it's such a beautiful example to all of us. Imagine knowing someone that is such a man of faith, a woman of faith, that you desire that same relationship with God. It's so powerful. Someone who speaks with God, and if you read further in verse 12, it goes on where God tells Moses that he knows him by name, having a conversation with God where God tells you, no, but I know you by name. Moses proceeds to ask that God reveals to him where he's going and who he's sending with, because Moses, and this is what Moses says, he can't go ahead, he can't go forth if he doesn't know God is with him. How are the people supposed to know that God is with him? You know, how can they know God if God doesn't go forth with him? Having that relationship with God to request that God will just reveal himself with him. This amazing man of faith. And we know that God later revealed his presence to Moses as much as Moses would be able to endure. That amazing man of faith. But now we're looking at the shadow. So if we look at Exodus 24, verse 13. And this is the part where my little child brain got a bit broken. Because I always just knew that Moses and Aaron had to go up to the mountain, because eventually you learn that the Israelites were too scared to go up, but Moses and Aaron were alone. But in in Exodus 24, verse 13, we read, Moses arose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. Joshua went with, and this was so astounding to me. It wasn't just Moses and Aaron. Joshua went with. If you read Exodus 32, verse 17, it mentions again, and when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. And this was while they were building the calf, while they were worshiping the golden calf, just reaffirming that the entire time that Moses was up in that mount, Joshua was there as well. He might not have been able to be in the presence of God as Moses and Aaron were, but he was there, well, as Moses was. But he was there. He was close to Moses. His assistant, Joshua, was there the entire time. While the entirety of Israel was too scared to go up to that mountain, while they were too scared of the presence of God, of the thunder and the lightning and the fire and the clouds, while they were so scared to go, Moses wasn't alone. Joshua had gone with him. And then in Exodus 33, I stopped halfway through verse 11. It starts, verse 11 starts with, so the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp. But his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. And it hit me. You know, we read of Moses being present at all these amazing instances of conversation with God. And then just at the end, Moses slips in that Joshua was there as well. He went up to the mount. He went out every day that Moses stood up and went to his tent, and his faith inspired people to worship in their tent doors as well. Joshua went with him to the tabernacle of meeting. He was there as well. Moses was seeking God. He was meeting with God face to face. But Joshua was seeking God every day as well. And when Moses had to go back and serve the people, Joshua remained. Joshua stayed behind to see God further. He didn't just leave. He was seeking God's presence. I would say not more than Moses, but more than Moses in a sense. He wanted that relationship that Moses had with God, so he stayed behind and he sought it. If we go to the book of Joshua, we'll see that Joshua took over from Moses, and God had to constantly reaffirm that Joshua had to be strong and courageous, that he shouldn't be dismayed. Because when he filled Moses' shoes, he felt his place in the shadow of Moses. He knew he wasn't Moses. He looked at his mentor, at Moses, who had led people through the Red Sea, who had given them the 10 Commandments, who had led people through the 10 plagues. He looked at all of this and he knew he could never be Moses. But still, he had been seeking God. And because God knew Joshua's heart, he kept reassuring them, do not be afraid, be courageous, be strong. And he led them through the river to the Jordan. He gave them the walls of Jordan. He reaffirmed that while Joshua was constantly in the shadow of Moses, seeking God, he had found God. And the message that I wanted to leave with all of you today is, while it's amazing to be Moses, and while I pray for all of us to be a Moses, to seek God in such a way, to know God in such a way that we can converse with God face to face, that he'd be our friend, that we truly know the character of God, I would want to encourage and wish for everyone to be a Joshua first, to not just want to skip ahead to the Moses part, because Moses had a journey to get to there as well. But I want to encourage you to be like Joshua, that while other people are afraid to go into the presence of God, while other people chicken out because it's intimidating or God asks a lot, that you won't be afraid, that you'll go. And even if it means sitting in the shadow and learning to know God, even if it means spending time with God when no one else sees you, because people were just seeing Moses, people were just thinking of Moses. Joshua's always just mentioned as an afterthought. And Joshua was there, and he remained. To stay there and see God's presence. When everyone else leaves God's presence, when everyone else has to go back to their lives, see God as, so that you can get to know God as Moses did. And so I'm going to close off with a word of prayer. So close your eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for the privilege we have of knowing you, of knowing that we can get to know you, Lord. Thank you for such amazing examples in the Bible, for Moses, who was a pillar of faith, who did miracle upon miracle upon miracle, who inspired people to faith, to worship. Lord, thank you for while he loses his temper and makes mistakes like we all do, he got to know you in such a way that he could speak to you face to face. Thank you for that example. But Lord, it sometimes feels so far out of reach, so unattainable. So thank you for the example of Joshua as well. Help us to be Joshuas. Help us to live in that shadow if we can't be where Moses is or where Moses was. Help us to go and seek your presence. Help us to not be afraid to go up into your presence like other people are. Help us to stay behind when other people might be done for the day. Help us to go and seek your presence still, Lord. Help us to never leave your side and aspire to know you as a friend would know a friend and speak to you face to face. I pray that you will bless everyone that's seeing this program, Lord, and that even if it is a bit touch and go and all over the show, that you will bless this message, that something in it will speak to all of our hearts, that we will get to know you, so that we can know you and your character in full, because that's the character that we want to adopt. That's what we aspire to have, what we want to have and live with in heaven. So thank you for your love and your mercy and everything you do for us. Bless everyone in this coming week. I pray this in your name. Amen.
Anushka, thank you so much for that beautiful message. And it's something I think all of us are praying, that we will be known as a man or a lady of God, and not by what our actions do sometimes. To our YouTubers, we are so blessed to have you joining us this point. We have to say goodbye to you, sadly. We are hoping and praying that someday you will come and join us on the platform itself. There is a few things that you are missing out on. Please know that you can always go to our website, get in contact with us, also go and see what other programs there is and what other things Advent Hope Online will offer as well. For tomorrow, we've got our Sunday group prayer at 7 p.m. Feel free to share and come and join us. If you've got prayer requests or anything like that, please send us an email. You can do it anonymously if you've got prayer requests. All of you have a wonderful